I'm not sure we're in a crisis of creative effectiveness. I think we're in a crisis of measuring creative effectiveness. I think that it really comes back to, are we looking at the wrong KPIs when we're judging the success of these campaigns?
Hello, and welcome to The Marketing Architects, a research-first podcast dedicated to answering your toughest marketing questions. I'm Elena Hengel. I run the marketing team here at Marketing Architects, and I'm joined by my co-host, Rob DeMars, our Chief Creative Officer.
Good morning.
Good morning, Rob. We are back today with our thoughts on some recent marketing news, always trying to root our opinions in data, research, and what drives business results. Rob and I are holding down the fort today, and we'll be talking about how marketers can create effective creative. What does effective mean when it comes to marketing creative? How do you measure it? And are we in some sort of crisis of creative effectiveness? So to kick us off, we got the idea for this show from a podcast we listened to a couple of weeks ago from WARC. It was their first episode recorded at Cannes Lions, which is an award show in France, known for being the most prestigious creative award show for advertising professionals. Their podcast opened with an interview with Gurdeep Puri, the founding partner of the Effectiveness Partnership. He shares some new creative effectiveness research in partnership with WARC and Cannes. The findings included these stats. 75% of marketers interviewed said they struggled to link creative activities to commercial return. 80% said they struggle to understand how their creative activities are actually working. 83% said one of their biggest headaches was making traction with the C-suite. And 79% said that they have inadequate training to make the connections between creative impact and business results, something that they need in order to connect with the C-suite. He goes on to say that with the unsteady economic environment we're in, it's more crucial than ever before for marketers to successfully make this connection between creative activities and commercial returns. He has a way of describing this that I really liked. He said marketers need to learn how to translate, quote, soft metrics to hard KPIs using frameworks, measurement standards, tracking, and more. And I'll add that it's not only marketers who have trouble linking great creative to business results. Award shows like Cannes aren't historically great at it either. Although I know they've been working to change this reality, but back in 2019, the IPA released their Crisis of Creative Effectiveness report. And in this report, they found that creatively awarded campaigns are now less effective than they have ever been in the entire 24-year run of data. And they're now no more effective than non-awarded campaigns. And System 1, the ad tracking company, backs this up for Cannes in particular. They analyzed how well the ads that won there build brands, and they found, and this was just back last year, the distribution of bad to good ads is roughly the same for Lion Award-winning campaigns as it was for their broad set of all advertising. And it's really held this way for 10 years. I do want to mention that creative is not the single driver of advertising success. Your media strategy, particularly pricing, plays an even larger role than creative does to campaign success, at least in our agency's experience. But today, we are not focused on that. We're focused on creative. So, Rob, you came to Marketing Architects from Campbell Mithun, now called McCann Minneapolis, which is a famous brand agency here in the Twin Cities. At Marketing Architects, we've chosen not to focus on awards like Cannes, but you worked at an agency where the culture around winning these awards was very different. So, I wanted to ask you, are you surprised by how poor these awards are at predicting creative effectiveness in market?
Oh, hell no. Quite honestly, I think these award shows serve a great purpose when it comes to people within the industry being able to show off some really great new wares in terms of thinking or production, some interesting strategery in terms of reaching audiences in fresh new ways. But does that translate to these campaigns are effective? Award shows have never been great at that. First of all, the people that are judging award shows tend to be creatives themselves. So creatives are great at judging other creative work, but they're not necessarily the people that are working in the analytics department that are truly analyzing these campaigns. So I think right away you have a situation that's flawed in terms of recognizing, campaign effectiveness. Oftentimes there's gamesmanship involved where, commercials are being run in Anchorage, Alaska at 2 a.m. because it's not really what the client wanted to air, but at least it can qualify for the award show. So again, work's getting recognized, but really was it the campaign work that drove the result, or was it a one-off that was done purely for award shows? I think the other challenge that we're seeing now is there's more and more of a call in award shows to have data that supports the campaign. And again, you look at the creative aspect of a campaign, sometimes nothing can be more creative than manipulating the data behind the results. And you look at headlines like site traffic increased by 300% because of this campaign. But what's that 300% of? Is it 2 visits? So again, it's very easy to manipulate the math. Also, at the end of the day, clients usually don't want you to submit the real data because it's proprietary. But that being said, there are still award shows like the Effies that do a pretty decent job of still needing to have some decent data behind it. But Cannes in particular is really flimsy.
Right. And Rob, I've never worked at a brand agency, but did it feel like, were awards always a topic? They're not a topic here because we don't enter big awards like that. But do you feel like that drove the type of work that was being created, or was that more something that you weren't thinking about? Do you feel like that impacted things at the agency?
Yeah, I think it can really depend upon the agency itself. There are some agencies that live and die by the award shows, and that's how you get promoted, and that's how you end up winning new business, because you really hang those trophies out for people to see. In particular, where I was at with McCann, it was a little bit more of a Midwestern packaged goods type agency that, while certainly submitted to the award shows, were really held to some strong KPIs in terms of the overall campaign success. So it wasn't as much of a priority. So I think it really can depend upon the agency.
Right. That makes sense. And whenever these awards come around, I feel like I see headlines about this quote unquote crisis of creative effectiveness. It seems like every year, right around Cannes, there are a lot of headlines and questions because of this data. Award shows, are they really rewarding campaigns that drive results? Do you resonate with that? Do you feel like we're in some sort of a crisis of creative effectiveness, or do you think this is more of just a headline that comes around every year at this time?
I'm not sure we're in a crisis of creative effectiveness. I think we're in a crisis of measuring creative effectiveness. I think that it really comes back to, are we looking at the wrong KPIs when we're judging the success of these campaigns? And that's something we spend a ton of time on, recognizing oftentimes there has to be really an integration of multiple KPIs from multiple sources of truth to really determine the true creative effectiveness for the campaign. So I think that's more of a call to arms for the entire industry, that are we measuring the effectiveness of these campaigns well?
Right. And to be honest, when people talk about creative effectiveness and effective creative, sometimes I wonder, well, what does that mean? Because there's a lot of different ways of describing the effectiveness of marketing. So what do you think about that? How do you define effective creative?
We recognize that at the end of the day, we need work that works remarkably, right? That's what we're here for. That's what our clients are paying us for. So that's definitely one side of the equation. But there's multiple ways you can get at work that works remarkably, and sometimes that doesn't really honor the brand. So that's where we look at remarkable work that works remarkably, and making sure that we're creating work that our clients can be proud of, that honors the brand, that has good brand stewardship, but at the end of the day also delivers on those necessary KPIs. I think the biggest debate we then had, as we think about that as our rallying cry, is how do we create some objectivity around what is remarkable work? And for that, we ended up spending quite a bit of time as a leadership team coming up with a framework. And we call that framework SPARK. So at the end of this day, we say, does the work spark? And SPARK is an acronym. So the S is for, does it surprise the consumer? We recognize that surprise and novelty are something that help drive memorability. So we are always going to grade our work on whether or not it is surprising and novel. The second is the P in Spark is provoke. And provoke is realizing that at the end of the day, we have to be able to drive action. All of our campaigns are measured both in short-term deterministic measures and long-term implications. So it's important for us to recognize at the end of the day, is it provoking action? A is a classic. Is it aligned with the brief? At the end of the day, it doesn't matter how great the work is if we're not on brief. The R is it repeatable in new and surprising ways? Does the idea have legs at the end of the day? Is it campaignable? And lastly, the K is for kindle. And does it kindle emotions? And we know that work that is emotive performs better. We've seen that over and over in the data. So that's an important part of the mix as well. So yeah, that's how we do it at Marketing Architects internally. It's how we align. Does the work spark?
I love Spark. And I think part of the reason I like it is because sometimes when we talk about marketing creative, it feels so hard to define. Like, what is it? And I think it's brave to just create an acronym and say, this is how we're judging the work, making it more objective. That seems like a good way to at least have some standard to hold creative to, right? Or else it can become this sort of elusive thing. And how do you really determine if it's successful or not?
And we still debate internally, like any agency should, is when we see the work, we debate it. But this at least gives us a framework to debate from that we're all aligned with. And, you know, you're not swimming in that sea of subjectivity.
Right. Or the running into the hippo, the highest paid person's opinion, just deciding what works and what doesn't. Rob, what's the hardest letter in your opinion? What do you think's most difficult to get right?
You know, I actually think it is, actually, I want to cheat and say there's two, but if I have to pick one, I think it's Kindle and recognizing what emotion is being pulled from a certain campaign. I think you can, I mean, number two in that I would say is surprising, but you can make a pretty good argument on whether something is novel or surprising. But emotion, you know, for instance, like humor can be a very subjective thing. And what you think is funny, I might not think is funny, or what you think is sad, I might not think is sad. So I think there's still a little bit more debate that occurs as it relates to, you know, what type of emotion is being drawn from this ad.
And don't different categories require different emotion too? It's not enough to just always try to be funny, right? Or always try to pull on the heartstrings. It depends on your audience, right? And what you're selling, what's appropriate to them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of creatives, because, you know, we like to laugh, so we think everything should be funny, but that's not always right for particular categories.
I know that's tempting to always try to lean into humor, right? But sometimes if you're selling a certain product, your consumers might not like it.
That is true.
If you're joking about certain categories and products. That leads me nicely into the topic of pretesting. I know pretesting can be a touchy subject for people in the creative industry. There's lots of different opinions on it. But speaking of trying to get creative right, have you found pretesting useful for predicting whether creative is going to be effective?
Yeah. In my previous life, you know, you mentioned McCann, that they were big on pretesting, and I hated it. I absolutely thought this makes no sense. There's no real value in spending all of this money in pretesting. After spending a good 20 years now at Marketing Architects, where we've always gone very deep into the deterministic data of campaigns and recognizing the real value of A/B split testing, I'm 100% a believer now in pretesting, to the point where we've built out our own pretesting platform, which is really the last milestone a campaign has to reach in order for it to see the air. It's across all of our clients, across all of our categories. We challenge ourselves to make sure that, you know, what we put into pretesting, we're going to be happy with whatever ultimately airs. There have been times in our past where you can see work that goes in there and you're like, well, let's just see what the consumers think. And dang nabbit, they liked that one. And it really wasn't what we were hoping for in terms of remarkable work. So we take that we take that to heart and are very serious about making sure we love the work that goes into pretesting. But our pretesting platform is really good at determining the near-in diagnostic read of how a creative is going to perform deterministically right away when it hits the air. So we put a lot of value in that. And that's job one of any campaign, is to make sure that it's driving the right type of response. But we also look at the long-term memorability, because we recognize that's important. And we have diagnostics that we look at that we have correlated with the longer-term brand lift of the campaign. So yes, we definitely are big believers in pretesting. It's always fair when we have creatives join the shop to go, really? And we take them through the process. We let them see, and then we let them experience it and recognize, yeah, this is as long as it's predictive and it's actually producing a result that's true in market, well, then why wouldn't you be doing it?
If you're a marketer, you already know TV advertising is powerful, but launching TV is not exactly easy. That's why Marketing Architects rebuilt TV advertising to help brands drive profitable growth. Introducing All-Inclusive TV, a revolutionary approach to TV advertising where all you pay for is media. Marketing Architects provides everything else needed for success, from stunning creative to results you can trust. Visit marketingarchitects.com to learn more. I know it must be frustrating to have your favorite concept not be chosen, but doesn't that also show that the platform is effective, right? If you're not, that's why we have it, because we're not always right at predicting what our customers are going to respond to.
I am an expert in my opinion, but at the end of the day, we let the consumer's voice be heard.
And once the consumer's voice is heard, we've picked a commercial, it's on the air. How then does your team determine, did it work? Was that creative effective or not?
Well, that's not my team. That's the analytics team at that point. So we are doing significant A/B testing in market, even after, we've already done the pre-testing. But if there's a control that we have for a particular campaign, our analytics team is head-to-head testing that TV work in market, very similar to what you see with digital. I mean, it's very precise. We have a great deal of confidence that the read we're getting from the analytics team is accurate. So at this point in time, the creatives kind of have to sit on their hands and watch the results come in.
One thing I was thinking about the other day with how we put commercials on air I read an article from John Evans. He wrote something for Marketing Week about creatives moving on too quickly from concepts and marketers always wanting the new. And there are some commercials and concepts that have lasted for years and years. And I think one thing that's helpful about our pretesting platform is it helps us resist the urge to just change. Because I've heard personal stories from the agency about some of our clients have commercials that have been on air for years and they are so hard to beat because they work. So I think maybe our pretesting platform can help us prevent that desire to just constantly be putting out new messages. Sometimes they can last for years and they're just incredibly effective.
Yeah, it's so classic for campaigns to, be mothballed while they're still in their prime. And a lot of times it has to do with new CMOs coming in and wanting to make their mark. And it's like, what's the easiest, most visible way to make their mark? Well, let's change the campaign. Let's do something new.
Right. And if anything at least now you have data to say, hey, we shouldn't change this because your customer is still responding to it and still likes it.
For sure.
Great. Well, thank you, Rob, for talking with us today about creative effectiveness. I think we'll wrap it up there. That's it for this episode of the Marketing Architects. You can connect with us on LinkedIn. And if you find our show valuable, please leave us a rating and review. And if you want to know what the research says about some recent news, you can contact us at marketingarchitects.com/podcast. Now go forth and build great marketing.